Over the past years, video game sales have risen to an all-time high. Total U.S. sales of video game hardware and software increased 204% from 1994 to 2014. With that rise, violent crime has decreased 37%, and murders by juveniles acting alone fell 76%. In a 2011 court case, Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that California could not ban the sale of violent video games to minors, even though a study showed that 60% of middle school boys and 40% of middle school girls who played at least one mature-rated, M-rated, game hit or beat up someone, compared to 39% of boys and 14% of girls who did not play M-rated games. An American Psychological Association study had found that violent video game play is linked to increased aggression in players, but insufficient evidence exists whether the link extends to criminal violence or delinquency.
You are linked to the violent character. If it's a first-person shooter game, you have the same visual perspective as the killer. You get points when you kill people. If you kill enough people, you get to advance to the next level of the game. You're also rewarded through things that you might hear. If you kill somebody, maybe you hear, "Impressive, nice shot. You are tied for the lead." And you hear these praise, and we know that reinforcement increases the probability of behavior. The results clearly showed that playing a violent video game increases aggressive behavior and also makes people numb to the pain and suffering of others. There is a link between exposure to violent media and violent criminal behavior. We can't do experimental studies. It's just a correlation. Correlation doesn't imply causation, but they're related.
One of the problems in this field is that people confuse aggression and violence. Some research will call sort of a competitiveness type aggression as equivalent to violence in the real world. There's absolutely no evidence that any video game or violent movie for that matter has ever caused a real world violent act. Playing violent video games is a normative behavior for teenagers today, especially boys, but for a lot of girls. It's true.
Just part of their life.
It's true that the Newtown, Connecticut shooter apparently played violent video games, but the local kids on your soccer team, your 13-year-old boys who live down the street from you, they're all playing these violent games too, and they are probably okay.
With all of these games out there, some people try to mimic what they play and turn it into a reality. That has been the case before. A news article published in 2003 stated that 2 teenagers in Tennessee shot at passing cars and killed one driver. They told the police they got the idea from playing Grand Theft Auto 3. This just goes to show that even the game is virtual, it can still be turned into a reality easily. There are many mass shootings that occurred in the United States that have been linked to these types of video games being the motive for. In the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting event, authorities claimed that Adam Lanza had played hours of games such as World of Warcraft and that they had influenced the event.
No one is suggesting that that's the only reason they went out and committed these horrific acts. But was it a tipping point? Was it something that pushed them over the edge? Was it a factor in that? Perhaps. That's a really big deal. When we speak about a cultural violence in our society, we're not just talking about the mass killers, the Newtowns. We're also talking about that we as a society, and many of us as individuals, accept violence as part of life because we've become numb to it, being so exposed to it.
Communities have called for action against the sale of these games to minors, and even to limit how many there are. Over the years, the rating technique has changed to determine what each game should receive, but people still claim that is not enough.
I'm a big believer in free speech. Common Sense's motto is sanity, not censorship. But I'm over the age of 18, and we can handle that, and you can too. Mm-hmm. But I don't want that game marketed to an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old, and that's what's happened. And so there are extraordinary changes that should happen, first of all, voluntarily by the industry, and second, that kind of marketing and sales practice can be regulated by the Federal Trade Commission.
I definitely noticed the the action, like the violence and stuff, and it definitely it resonates within me. But I always try to kind of separate that whole video game violence from real violence.
Diane Franklin, Missouri Republican, is calling for a tax on violent video games. They're pushing for a 1% sales tax on video games rated T, M, and AO. Massachusetts Mayor Robert Dolan has been talking to schools within his district to set up a buyback program for these games where parents or children could bring in the game in exchange for a possible no homework pass. There is very little evidence as to if playing violent video games influences violent crime, but there are studies that have occurred to help prove that these video games can alter the mind and make the player more aggressive. With many younger children playing these games for long periods of time, the child may become more easily aggravated toward others. In many close cases, the games were determined an influence for the act, but were not the main cause of them.